contra Kalinikos, never one to miss an academic trend, but there is no ethical deficit in Marx. This is Kalinikos's way of entering the ethical debate. He admits there's an ethical deficit in Marx. Marx's scathing assault on bourgeois morality stems from his realization from 1844, when he involved himself with Silesian weavers in their struggle, that in their opposition to the bourgeoisie, workers explode the Kantian divide between egoism and altruism. And I feel I'm echoing what Sean was saying in his letter on poetics at the end of the Happiness book. This is the tight bourgeois self whose dissolution by the commune Rambo found so intoxicating. It's what we feel during the great demos and riots and occupations. Morality, a system of managing individuals individually from the inside, tells us nothing about this wondrous new social development, this amazing possibility. And for me, morality and ethics are both the same. Paul tried to mount on the phone and think that ethics is different. I mean, as far as I can see it, everyone has morality. It's fairly common regard, and ethics is something a philosopher will give you. But I think Marx is criticising both. But using the terms given up to us by capital, i.e. alienation, exploitation, commodity, capital, surplus value, allow us to indict the injustices of rational capitalism and pin the target on the real enemies of mankind. They give us the rational means to deal with this overwhelming stuff. Now, Blackledge is a good enough Marxist to understand his school for morals. However, there's a deadness to the would-be rousing conclusions which come after each section of Marxism and ethics, which imply that boringness and the rehearsal of the already known convey authority. And I think this is a real problem with the SWP and organised left politics. It's as if boringness and the rehearsal of the already known convey authority. They do convey authority in these organisations. In fact, boringness is actually a sign of repression. And this is where I'm loading my Freudian musket, my anti-psychiatry, my Peter Sedgwick side. Something lacking, something omitted, something unsaid. It's a repression. Even when they had Marx's portrait up on the office wall in the Stalinist era, bureaucrats detested reading him, because he and Engels never repeated a formula. Like the music of Pierre Boulez, quite explicitly, he actually said he composes the same thing in spirals, and Frank Zappa and Yanko Dumitrescu, who told me last month, well, actually, I just write the same piece again and again. Like them, the work of Marx and Engels is a continuous spiral, persistently expanding the perimeters of the germ idea. And like decent free improvisers in music, they remember what they've played and understand how it's changed the environment they're working in. Reiteration can never recapture the first moment of saying. There's no mantra or prayer or formula that can save us, only immediate response to the new actuality and knowledge of the past events which created that actuality. However shocking it may appear to comrades who like to parrot back the new line at Marxism, reiteration is actually the enemy of revolution. I remember sitting in an NUJ Thrasher meeting and someone said, let us reiterate, just to tell us what we'd already been told 10 times before. Blackledge's fear of invention and specificity, the aspect of contingency which Dada foregrounded in the realm of art and wished to fuse with Leninist insurgency, also entails suppression of Paul's own viewpoint. Despite his reiterated calls for a dialectic between subject and object, between specific struggles and a universal vision, Paul keeps to the high ground of abstraction, and this is not the unstable and generative abstractions of Hegel, which are perpetually toppling the smug certainties of unreflective thinking and recombining in an unpredictable revolutionary alchemy, but the high ground of academic political theory, which proposes a descriptive vocabulary which could put every historical philosophy in its place. Words like consequentialist, formalist, normative, and functionalist. A world where no one ever expresses truths burning with urgency, everyone makes a claim to be scrutinised by a committee of Oxford logical positivists, I suppose. This language of claiming, very shape. I mean, sort of absurd things like Trotsky claims that the working class claim. This transcendent supra-historical jargon sits uneasily among the book's Marxist terms, which have themselves been simplified into descriptive generalities. In Marxism and Ethics, Marxism is presented as positive philosophy, as if it's the end of the matter. That's that, comrades. Now we, or rather you, since Paul is probably busy in the library, although that's a slur on him, because on the phone he told me he'd been talking to Ian Birchall, and he was on the demo in Manchester, good on you, Paul. Whereas Marx's determinate critiques knock holes in ideology, so our real experiences and observations in social being can rush in, so we're faced with sober senses what we really are, and then need to find other people to talk about these discoveries to. That's real solidarity. Reading Marx on your own, getting completely alienated and having to wander through the city to find some other people suffering from the same thing. It's an intellectual thing, not simply being a dumb soldier in a class struggle defined by politicos. You can't read Marx without talking about what he's made you think, writing tracts, communicating, being a revolutionary. Now, I took this example quite honestly from Marxism and Ethics at random, and I'll read it to you. I decided I'd take a random sentence. For Marx, our nature evolves in a context of humanity's developing productive powers and the struggle for democratic control over those powers. Do I need to say it again?
Say it again.
I'm not, because to be fair, it's hard for me to inhabit it, so I'm probably not reading very well. For Marx, our nature evolves, our human nature evolves in a context of humanity's developing productive powers and the struggle for democratic control over those powers. So it's good in a way. I mean, it's at least our nature's evolving, and at least there's some sort of conflict about how it's evolving. So in a way, who can argue with that? But why does the sentence feel so lifeless, so unlike Reagan Challoner's writing? It doesn't have the bite, the clarity of communication. I think it's because Paul is trying, and it's not to do with Paul's style. There is no form, there is no content. I completely refuse that split. I argued with Martin Bennell for 15 years over this, and he finally said he'd never divide form from content again. Like, I won. The problem is that Paul is trying to finish with the definition of human nature and move on to the next topic. It's not the demolition of a specific error which has been blocking our own thoughts, because that for me is the explosive nature of Marxism, the exciting bit. It's an attempt to monopolise and occupy the conclusion of the thinking process. The at least we can all agree on this lowest common denominator otiosity of a blog by Nina Power. Even though Blackledge, I noticed there's only members of the AMM that laugh at these jokes. Even though Blackledge says it's evolving, human nature is not evolving here as I read these lines. But I anticipated this, and when Ray Challoner, with his finely honed sense of the correct gutter press phrase, makes me laugh out loud at the rank duplicity of the British ruling class, or Bonnie makes my hair stand on end with the bluntness of his observations about life now in London, something in me evolves. For all that it's fighting the good fight to restore a Marxist dialectic, Paul is not really engaging the reader in a dialogue, he's trapping us in a monotonous and static explanation. In his 10 Theses on the Philosophy of Language, written against the logical positivism he found in Oxford after he'd fled the Nazis in 1930, Theodor Adorno argued that the language used by philosophy isn't arbitrary. Each term in philosophy emerges out of a distinct social development. It's imbued with that specificity. And he's echoing Hegel on the begriff, on the concept. It emerges from social development. It's not a static thing. Of course, it's easy to be impressed by the glittering clarity of Greek philosophical thought. You know, it's just astonishing when you read Plato. They're sort of getting drunk and they're talking about sex and they're talking about abstractions, and you think, this was written so long ago and I can understand it so clearly. It's not like reading the Bible or something, it's sort of there. But if Marx and Engels had a mission, it was to reveal the historical nature of such concepts, and hence their uselessness as terms for criticising the bourgeoisie. Hence the redundancy of ethics, for example. Now, Paul once told me something I've always remembered, that Chris Harman, who was a mentor for him, said of his first published work, "I can't hear your voice, Paul." Paul also told me on the phone 2 days ago that his partner thinks Marxism and ethics is turgid and boring. He told me this and roared with laughter. It's very endearing. Judgment with which he concurs. But this